Welcome to the Living Healthy Podcast, a podcast dedicated to health, fitness, exercise, medicine, diet, nutrition, as well as eating clean, organic, and non-GMO foods. Let's live the journey through weight loss, weight management, and accomplishing goals. I'm your host, Eddie Randall. Thank you for tuning in to Season 3, Episode 9 of the Living Healthy Podcast. Your continued listening and your continued support are greatly appreciated. Please feel free to check out the latest merchandise at the Living Healthy Podcast store. The link is in the description of the podcast. Infectious diseases are more common than one would think. It is vital to take our health and safety and the health and safety of our families very seriously. Common sense and some basic healthy knowledge are two of the biggest tools that we can use to combat infectious disease. It's up to us to be diligent, smart, and aware. There are outlets out there that provide concise and accurate information. We can use that information along with knowledge and common sense to develop a solid understanding and implement ways to protect us and the ones we love. That is one reason why I enjoy bringing you all this podcast and highlighting simple, safe, and effective ways to keep yourself healthy. Infectious diseases have always been around. However, some infectious diseases that were once extinct in America are slowly finding their way back into the population. The purpose of this podcast is not to make anyone fearful or to cause panic. The purpose is to inform you so you can make educated decisions on how to protect yourself and your family. Today's podcast is entitled Infectious Disease and How to Stay Safe in Day-to-Day Life. Common infectious diseases you need to be aware of. There are lots of infectious diseases that are out there, but I'm going to focus on a few. They include the most prevalent, the deadliest, and also one in particular that was literally eradicated from America, but there is a current outbreak of this disease as of the recording of this podcast. The thing about infectious disease is that some people who are perfectly healthy may not know someone that has had an infectious disease, or that same person may have had it themselves and have had minor symptoms. Therefore, it may cause them to be lackadaisical and to not be as careful as they could be. Another person may also be perfectly healthy and they end up getting an infectious disease, but in their case, they may end up with more severe symptoms or even die from the disease. I am reiterating that common sense and basic health knowledge are our biggest allies when in public. Infectious diseases are literally diseases that are obtained from other people or from an object that has droplets from an infected person. Say, for instance, you're infected with an infectious disease. However, you do not know it yet because you are in the incubation phase of that particular disease. You're in a grocery store picking up something and you sneeze. Perfectly normal behavior. 5 to 10 seconds later, someone comes up on the side of you to pick up something. You're both there for a few seconds shopping. Then you leave, and the person is there for a few seconds more, inhaling the unseen droplets that were released when you sneezed. Now, you may have never gotten sick because your immune system fought it off. Now, the person who was next to you, on the other hand, they develop the disease. They suffer complications and unknowingly pass it on to a family member who also develops complications and unfortunately passes. Now, the scenario I just listed is normal, being that shopping in a store with people and interacting with others is 100% healthy and normal. I illustrated that scenario not to scare you from being around others, but rather to inform you how some forms of infectious diseases are spread. Taking steps to be healthy fall on common sense and basic health knowledge. When you try to keep yourself healthy by eating the right foods and using some sanitary measures, which I will go into later in the podcast, you're keeping yourself healthy, your family healthy, and your community healthy. If you are a man, You may have a wife, girlfriend, and or a child that rely on you for your love, emotional, and financial support. They need you. You wouldn't knowingly or willfully bring home an infectious disease and put your family at risk. Since the coronavirus pandemic, a lot of people do things differently. Handshaking is one of them. I no longer shake hands. I know quite a few people who no longer shake hands. I fist bump or elbow bump. Our fingers touch everything, and sometimes, unfortunately, they end up in our mouth or nose, giving whatever is on our fingers from what we've touched a gateway to get inside our body. That is basic health knowledge. I mention that to say this. When diseases change and become more dangerous, as in the case with COVID-19, or they become more prevalent, your behavior changes with it. My example was no longer shaking hands and choosing to fist or elbow bump instead. That's where the common sense would come in. I don't remember which class it was. I think it was microbiology. My professor told us that infectious diseases are the same all year around. So the term cold and flu season is a bit misleading. She said that it may seem like infectious diseases are more prevalent in the winter. She said the reason it seems that way is because it's colder and more people tend to be around each other more, and it gets reported and recorded that way. The first disease I would like to talk about is RSV. RSV stands for respiratory syncytial virus. RSV is spread by close contact by breathing in the droplets of an infected child or adult. This happens when you have a conversation in close quarters. It's also spread by touching contaminated surfaces such as toys, a book, a table, doorknobs, shopping cart handles, etc. Then after touching those infected areas, the virus can enter the body by placing your fingers in your nose, mouth, and eyes. People usually get sick within 3 to 7 days of initial infection. If you have a set of lungs, you're at risk for getting this infection. That being said, most children get this infection by the age of 2. Adults can get it, and you're also at a greater risk if you are 60 years or older. Symptoms are similar to a cold. These symptoms include coughing, fever, congestion, runny nose, sore throat, labored breathing, sneezing, malaise, and headaches. In severe cases, this can lead to pneumonia and finding it extremely difficult to breathe. What makes this different from a common cold is that RSV creates a copious amount of mucus, which can make it very difficult to breathe. It's dangerous for all of us, but what makes it dangerous for young babies and adults is that a young and developing immune system usually has difficulty combating this disease. Seniors with lowered immune systems can also suffer. If you suffer from asthma or any other respiratory ailment, you're more at risk to develop complications. During the heart of the coronavirus pandemic, RSV and how common it is in children were one of the factors in deciding to close schools. According to the CDC, just under 100,000 children and 160,000 adults are hospitalized for this infection. They go on to state that 10,000 adults and around 300 children die every year from RSV in the United States. When infection sets in, the duration is approximately 3 to 7 days. The next infectious disease is the flu virus or influenza virus. This virus spreads the same way as the respiratory syncytial virus. Droplets in the air can enter your mouth when talking, singing, and breathing in close proximity of an infected person. The same goes for touching an object that has the virus on it, and it hitches a ride on your fingers and into the body via touching the face, nose, and eyes. People can start getting sick 1 to 2 days after coming into contact with an infected person. The flu can infect anyone at any age. Children under 2 and adults over 60, along with people who have compromised immune systems, are at a disadvantage and are often called people who are in an at-risk group. If you have a set of lungs, no matter your age, you are at risk. The CDC states that during the 2020 flu season, that 200 children died from the flu. They also state that every year 35,000 people die from the flu in the US. It can affect anyone and is common, but is nothing to laugh at or take lightly. Worldwide, over 400,000 people die from the flu every year. I have been fortunate to have great health all my life, but I do remember catching the flu in my early teens, and I felt so bad I literally thought I was going to die. I can't imagine what, with more lethal ailments like COVID, what some people must have gone through. Symptoms of the flu include fever, chills, malaise, headaches, fatigue, sore throat, coughing, and congestion. The virus can run its course between 4 to 8 days. The next infectious disease of note is necrotizing fasciitis. It's also known as flesh-eating bacteria. I've taken care of a few patients that have had it, and it is a horrible infection to have. It almost sounds like something made up, like something in a zombie horror movie. Unfortunately, flesh-eating bacteria is real and it is contagious. People can get infected when someone who has this infection in their system sneezes, coughs, or talks. Someone in close proximity can absorb the droplets in their eyes or simply inhale them. They can also enter the body when you touch an area that has the infected droplets, and you end up touching your eyes, nose, mouth, or a cut or wound. Once it is in the blood, it can reach the skin, and because of this, the skin can look like you have a bruise and or a blister, but it's from the flesh-eating bacteria underneath that is the culprit. This can lead to a plethora of complications and lead to sepsis and even death. Another way you can become infected, which is just about the most common way, is by the bacteria getting into an open cut and developing. A few places the bacteria can live is on credit card keypads, shopping carts, door handles, and gas pump handles. If you have a cut on your finger or anywhere on your hand and the bacteria gets in that area, infection can set in quickly. Another way is while at the beach, which I think is actually the most common because most of the stories that are at least reported, that's how they're stating that how they accumulate this infection. It's due to some forms of the bacteria living in the water. If you get water in your mouth, nose, eyes, or an open cut, infection will set in. Other ways, which are a little rare, are by having the bacteria already on your skin and it gets introduced into your body by an insect bite. Using intravenous drugs and burns are also other ways that the bacteria can be introduced into your body. Necrotizing fasciitis is very aggressive. Once infected, you can notice pain almost immediately. Severe symptoms can develop in the next 12 to 24 hours. Sepsis can lead to death within 24 to 48 hours. The infection can lead to amputations, health problems, and disfigurement. Annually, there are about 1,000 to 2,000 cases in the United States, and although that is not a huge number in comparison to the population, it can lead to death if not treated quickly. According to the CDC, 1 out of every 5 people will die from the disease. Now that's 1 out of every 5 that are infected. As far as the age groups that can be affected, it can affect anyone, but especially those with weakened immune systems. Symptoms include intense pain, swelling, fever, malaise, chills, nausea, diarrhea, and disfigured dark purple skin. Up next is TB, or tuberculosis. TB is highly infectious and is spread from person to person. Similar to the infections I just mentioned, TB can spread when an infected person sneezes, coughs, talks, laughs, etc., and a person near them breathes in the droplets. The dexterity of TB stands out a bit more than other infectious diseases in that TB can live on objects for up to 6 months. Now, this bacteria is very tough. Now, there's an article by Schwartzman and Menzies that was published by the Canadian Medical Association Journal called How Long Are TB Patients Infectious? They state that even while being treated with antibiotics for TB, the bacteria can live in the saliva of patients for weeks. They go on to state that it can remain in the air for up to 12 hours. That is astonishing. That being said, TB, as I mentioned, can live on objects for 6 months. The difference in touching objects that have TB droplets on them is this. TB can remain dormant in the body. So if someone that has TB, but it's dormant and not yet infectious, and they sneeze without covering their nose, those droplets will hang in the air and some will land on objects. But since the person is not infectious, the disease is not waiting to be contracted by an unsuspecting person. Therefore, there are many people walking about with TB, but the bacteria lies dormant. When the immune system becomes compromised and a person has a heavy growth of TB bacteria, the bacteria becomes active and infection sets in, and the person becomes infectious. TB is very dangerous. Obviously more so for immune-compromised individuals. That being said, as far as a particular age group, if you have a set of lungs, you're at risk. I'm not saying that when you walk outside, TB droplets are going to come down and jump on you and kill you. What I'm saying is it doesn't necessarily matter who you are. If you're a living being with lungs, you're fair game. Back in the early 1900s in the United States, TB was the #1 killer. Thankfully, it's not as common as it once was, but it's still very dangerous. According to the World Health Organization, 10.6 million people fell ill with TB annually. They go on to state that annually 1.6 million people die from it. TB has 3 stages that coincide with symptoms. The first stage is exposure, and you won't really feel anything. Your TB skin test will be normal, and you'll be generally healthy. The next stage is TB infection. In this stage, the bacteria manifests in the body, but the immune system keeps it in check. The immune system doesn't do what it normally does by killing off pathogens. Instead, the pathogen is prevented from doing any further damage and it's forced to lie dormant. Finally, the last stage of TB is TB disease. This occurs when the immune system becomes compromised and TB takes advantage and becomes prolific in the body. This is when the person is contagious. Once contagious, the symptoms include a cough, coughing up blood, fever, chills, painful and labored breathing, malaise, and weight loss. What makes TB a bit more dangerous is that it can affect other organs in the body, such as the kidneys, spinal cord, and brain. When TB attacks the kidneys, it can lead to hematuria, or blood in the urine. When it attacks the spinal cord, it can lead to nerve damage, neuropathy, and back pain. When it attacks the brain, it can cause headaches. It can also cause meningitis, and it can kill nerve cells. E. coli, aka Escherichia coli, is another infectious disease. We often see this on the news due to some type of lettuce or other vegetable recall due to an E. coli contamination. When the recall is lifted and after some time, people can go back to eating that particular vegetable. However, it's not common in the public to question how the E. coli got there in the first place. E. coli is a normal bacteria found in human feces. Infections from back in the day would occur when workers who pick the vegetables would use the restroom right in the area where they're working, right there in the soil. That's absolutely not sanitary. Or they wouldn't properly wash their hands and then continue to work and to touch the product. Then these vegetables are picked and the E. coli has time to grow on them while waiting to be processed and packaged. Then shortly after, it arrives in supermarkets around the U.S. E. coli infections start an outbreak. Hospitals, clinics, and urgent care centers report and share this data with their local health departments, and that's how health agencies are able to track down the source of infection. Now, E. coli is also spread by other means of the fecal-oral route. It can also be found in or on fresh meat from the meat section of the supermarket, as well as eggs. I don't want to make it seem like ranchers, farm workers, and poultry farmers are using the bathroom near where they raise and process their products. They're not. The example I gave is rare, and it's just one example. The main way E. coli can end up on products is by cross-contamination. That's why it's very important to wash the meat with vinegar and water before cooking it thoroughly. I would also advise washing off your eggs and to not simply transfer them from the carton to your refrigerator. Granted, farmers, ranchers, and workers all work within the guidelines of the FDA, and they want to deliver a clean, safe product. But I would still wash all vegetables, meat, and eggs before storing and or eating them. When I took microbiology in college, my professor said that when you buy meat, don't just put the packaging into the freezer. Remove the meat from the packaging, clean it, season it if you desire, and put it in freezer bags for storage. She said whatever bacteria that is on the meat in the packaging will just cease to grow. Some bacteria can wall itself off and to prevent from dying when you put it up in the freezer and that temperature drops. When you go to thaw out that meat, even while it's cooking, the temperature becomes ideal and the bacteria will continue to grow. That's why you need to cook the meat all the way because, even in very, very hot conditions, bacteria can survive. And if that bacteria happens to be E. coli, it will grow at an exponential rate. Each colony of E. coli can double in just 20 minutes. So by washing the meat and changing out the packaging when you get home, you're giving yourself the best chance of eliminating the risk of getting sick in case there happens to be any pathogen on the meat. E. coli can also be found on other things such as cell phones, doorknobs, car door handles, steering wheels, gas pump handles, shopping carts, elevator buttons, banisters, etc. E. coli can live up to 2 hours on an inanimate object. In some cases, it can live longer than that. The International Journal of Food Microbiology published an article by Wilkes and Michaels called The Survival of Escherichia coli 0157 on a Range of Metal Surfaces. They conducted some experiments on how long the bacteria can live on metal, and they determined that E. coli can live on stainless steel for over 28 days. I want to thank you for supporting me by listening to the Living Healthy podcast. My podcast is listed on many platforms, including Anchor, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and many, many others. Please follow me on Tumblr, X, formerly known as Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, YouTube, and Rumble. If you have any questions or topics you'd like me to cover, please don't hesitate to ask. Also, if you'd like to be a guest on the show, please contact me at livinghealthy@gmail.com. In addition, please check out the Living Healthy podcast store. The link is in the description of the podcast. And now back to the show. The toxin that E. coli produces is what makes us sick. How it finds its way into the body is by touching any item that's been contaminated with it and then touching our mouths. This happens with children more often, but it happens with adults all the same. I'm not bad-mouthing anyone. I'm just giving some examples of how E. coli can end up in our bodies without us really knowing it. I've seen instances where children are in a store on the ground with what I assume is their favorite toy, playing with it. It's normal and natural for kids to want to play, and kids will put their hands in their mouths often because they're kids. And if they're on the floor in a store where hundreds or sometimes thousands of people frequent a day, E. coli has time to flourish. It gets there from shoes. Everywhere we step, we pick up things and transfer them when we walk. Another example I wanted to use was during the pandemic, I saw a lady who in front of me in the produce section of a supermarket. She was checking out the grapes. She opened the resealable bag and ate one. Then she grabbed her shopping cart with both hands and continued shopping. Again, I'm not bad-mouthing anyone. We're supposed to shop, and there is nothing wrong if you want to try one before you eat it. But for one, it's always good to wash fruits and vegetables before you eat them. And two, I don't know if she wiped off the shopping cart handle before she started using it, as many stores have sanitizer wipes now in the same area as the carts. But if she didn't, that is a way how pathogens, in this case E. coli, can end up in our bodies. The incubation period can be anywhere from 3 to 4 days. Anyone can get sick from E. coli. Symptoms of E. coli infection include vomiting, nausea, diarrhea, severe stomach cramps, fever, and sepsis. If sepsis sets in, the person can die from the disease. Every year in the United States, there are approximately 300,000 infections, with about 75,000 people dying from that disease. Next on the list is a very surprising infectious disease, or at least for me it's surprising. Leprosy. Leprosy, of all things, is an infection that is rampant in the United States. As of August of 2023, in Florida, leprosy is spreading at an alarming rate. One way the infection is spread is by people in the U.S. traveling to countries who have a current outbreak, as well as people who have migrated from those countries to the U.S. Leprosy is spread from droplets that go into the air when someone who has it sneezes, coughs, talks, or sings. As with the other infectious diseases that I mentioned, you can acquire this from coming into close contact with someone that has it by breathing in droplets, as well as touching an area with infected droplets and putting your fingers in on your face or in your mouth. The bacteria can also find its way into your body via an open cut or wound. It can live outside the body in places like soil. 1 out of every 10 people who get infected will actually display symptoms. And according to the CDC, as of 2020, there were 159 cases in the United States, with 32 of them coming from Florida. The incubation period can be as little as a few months or as long as a year. Mostly children and preteens have made up the majority of cases. However, all age groups are susceptible to the illness. Symptoms of the disease include nerve damage, eye damage, bumps, rashes, lesions, and deformities in the hands and feet. People can also go blind. They can develop kidney failure, infertility, as well as nerve damage to the brain and spinal cord. So it's a very debilitating disease. Some have seen pictures where the fingers and toes are severely deformed. However, that only happens particularly in third world countries when treatment, or rather when the person has gone untreated long after infection is set in. When you're treated, you're given a very strong dose of antibiotics for as little as 2 years or as long as 4 years. No one wants any kind of disease, but this is definitely one that you do want to avoid getting. The World Health Organization reports that there are over 200,000 cases reported per year. Now, the mortality rate of this is not as so much a factor. The thing with this type of infectious disease is that it can cause lifelong disability. That is why early detection and treatment is vital. The last infectious disease I'll mention is EG5 or Eris, which is the latest variant of the COVID-19 virus. It's actually an Omicron variant. And as of August 2023, this is the primary variant dominating cases in the United States. There's an article published by the British Medical Journal on August 16th of 2023 by Owen Dyer. He states that EG5 has improved its ability to evade immunity and that, according to the CDC, the number of reported EG5 cases doubled in the U.S. in only 2 weeks. I'm not going into incubation, risk group, symptoms, or lethality, as most people who were made aware of this in the last 3 years. So you already know what COVID can do to the body. I'm only mentioning it because it's a very serious infectious disease, and the thing I will go into about is long COVID, which unfortunately is extremely debilitating. whether it be myocarditis, neurological disorders, shortness of breath, brain fog, or blood clots. This is definitely an infection that you don't want to get. People are still suffering from long COVID 2 to 3 years after they were initially infected. Common sense and prevention go hand in hand. The majority of people have a healthy immune system, and they may pick up certain infectious diseases and never even know that they've had them. Their immune system would fight it off and tag those pathogens, so if they ever come back again, the immune system would fight it off even faster. That being said, common sense goes a long way in the fight against infectious disease. If you have young children or elderly parents, it would be ideal to limit exposure to certain things that would put them at risk. Everyone wants to go back to normal, and for the most part, we have, thank God. COVID-19 forced a stark reality upon us. Although there are still a significant amount of cases and reinfections, we are not as bad as we were this time last year. That being said, common sense and prevention are still vital. Social distancing, masking, hand washing, sanitizers, gloves, curbing your child's behavior in stores, wiping down shopping carts, wiping down commonly used areas are things that we can do to help protect ourselves and our community. For social distancing, think of it this way. I don't mean just to avoid people or whatever, but if you're sick, stay home from work and keep your kid home from school. That is the normal and decent thing to do. If you go out into public with any kind of illness, even if it's just a simple cold, not only could you spread that illness to those around you, you could also pick up an illness as your immune system is currently fighting the sickness that you have. You're essentially at high risk for developing something else. As far as masking, many people still wear masks in public due to the coronavirus. Masks in general can help reduce your exposure to respiratory droplets from any type of pathogen that hangs out in the air. If you are sick and you have to go in public, say to shop, and you have someone at home who has a compromised immune system, you may want to wear a mask as a way of protecting them. Think of it this way. Those of you who have spent a whole day doing yard work, or those who do landscaping for a living. At the end of the day, when you come inside and blow your nose and clean it out, you see all the dirt that's been trapped in your nostrils. The only difference with this is that you're able to see the dirt. You're not able to see droplets or respiratory droplets that end up in your respiratory tract. Droplets and dust and things that we breathe in are measured in microns or micrometers, which is 1/1,000,000th of a meter. These are so small they can't be seen by the human eye. As an example, a speck of dust or dirt can range in size between 1 to 100 micrometers. A speck of sand at the beach is about 60 micrometers. Respiratory droplets range between 50 to 10 micrometers, and droplets need to be smaller than 10 micrometers to be breathed into our lungs. Bacteria can range between 1 to 3 micrometers, and the COVID-19 virus is approximately 0.1 to 0.5 micrometers. Masks can work effectively, so even if you're out in the yard cleaning, using harsh chemicals to clean a bathroom, or at an event with a lot of people, while masks are not 100% effective, wearing one in addition to other safety measures can help to keep you safe against all type of respiratory infections. I won't go into types of masks because from the pandemic, there's already a lot of information out there on mask types. Another thing you can do, and I touched on it earlier, was washing fruits and vegetables thoroughly. I recommend doing this even if they've been pre-washed. Just fill up your sink with a quarter or halfway with water. Use a mild dish liquid and a half a cup of vinegar. Then rinse thoroughly. The surfactants in the soap lift and cling to the pathogens, and the vinegar neutralizes them. And then the rinse water will just wash them away. Use the same technique with eggs, and when washing meat, soap is not necessary. Just cold water and vinegar should do fine. Make sure you wash your hands when using the bathroom, especially if you're using a public bathroom. Make sure to wipe off shopping cart handles, and you can also keep some hand sanitizer handy if you feel so inclined. You can also get vaccines. Every year during flu season, we see an uptick in vaccine awareness. There are vaccines for a plethora of infectious diseases. If a vaccine is something you're interested in, just discuss this with your doctor and make a decision that best suits you and your family. Also, change your air filter in your car more often. If you're unable to change it yourself, just have the dealership or a car mechanic do it. We spend lots of times in our cars, and those filters prevent contaminants from making their way into our lungs. The same goes for the filter in the AC system of our home. I recommend changing the filter every 2 months or so. We spend the majority of our time in our home, and our home is our sanctuary. Changing the filter more often or on a regular basis can help to reduce pathogens and help us to breathe and live in cleaner air. Also, regarding clean air, I would advise in investing in an air purifier. You can set one up in your living room or den or wherever your family spends the majority of their time. Healthy prevention. Healthy prevention includes foods that we can eat to help build the immune system. These foods contain vitamins and antioxidants that give our bodies the best shot at preventing or helping us to recover as quickly as possible from these infectious diseases. Fruits that help boost the immune system are oranges, lemons, blueberries, limes, grapefruits, tangerines, blackberries, papaya, and kiwi. These fruits are a significant source of vitamin C, minerals, and nutrients that are phenomenal in maintaining our immune systems. One orange contains about 80% of your recommended daily amount of vitamin C, and half a glass of orange juice contains 100% of your daily recommended amount. One lemon contains 50% of the daily recommended amount. So I would recommend squeezing 2 lemons with 16 ounces of water. You can have one in the morning and the other at lunch or in the evening. Blueberries have anthocyanins that reduce inflammation in the body, and a cup of blueberries contains 25% of the daily recommended allowance of vitamin C. One lime contains about 50%, and you can have 2 of those a day in a similar fashion to lemons. Grapefruit is up next, and many people have one in the morning for breakfast, which is a great way to start the day. One grapefruit has 50% of the recommended daily amount. It's also a great source of potassium, and a grapefruit contains 135 milligrams, although you need about 3,000 to 4,000 milligrams per day of potassium. Even though 135 milligrams is not a whole lot, it adds up through the day. If you consume healthy fruits and vegetables, you'll slowly build up that number to the recommended amount. Potassium is great for the body, but in particular for lung health. It helps to promote lung health and strengthens and protects them. A tangerine contains 34% of the daily recommended amount of vitamin C. They also contain 10% of the daily recommended amount of vitamin A. Vitamin A is great for the immune system as well as for lung health. 4 to 5 tangerines a day would be an ideal way to have a healthy snack, all while helping to maintain your immune system. Blackberries are a fantastic source of potassium and vitamin C, with 233 milligrams per cup of potassium. That cup is also 30% of the recommended amount. Next on the list is papaya. One papaya contains twice the daily recommended amount of vitamin C. They're also a great source of potassium and a significant source of vitamin A. One kiwi contains 83% of the daily recommended amount of vitamin C. Kiwi is also a great source of copper. Copper is essential for cell signaling and in particular to the immune system. So as you can see, incorporating these fruits into your diet can have a significant impact on boosting your immunity and protecting you from infectious diseases. Up next are vegetables. Red bell peppers, ginger, spinach, kale, cabbage, and sweet potato are all great vegetables that can help your immune system. Red bell peppers are extremely healthy. They contain twice the daily amount of vitamin C. They're also a great source of vitamin A. 1 cup contains 26% of the daily recommended value. Ginger is next, and anyone who follows my podcast knows that I love ginger. On top of it having a great taste, it also has tremendous antiviral and antibacterial properties. Having a cup or two of ginger tea daily will do wonders to help boost your immune system and help support your respiratory system. Spinach is a great source of vitamin E and beta-carotene, which does wonders for helping support lung health. Kale is another one of my favorite vegetables. I'm glad that it's also a great source of vitamins and minerals for the immune system. It's a significant source of vitamin K, vitamin A, potassium, and calcium. It also contains a marginal amount of vitamin C. The vitamin K helps to repair and strengthen tissues in the respiratory tract. Vitamin A helps to create T and B lymphocytes, which are responsible for fighting off infection. And potassium has anti-inflammatory properties and helps to regulate the immune system. Calcium plays a role in the immune system by helping cells to communicate, and it has fever-reducing properties. Cabbage has anti-inflammatory and anti-cancer properties. It can also help to soothe the GI tract. The fact that cabbage helps the GI system speaks volumes, as the GI system has a tremendous role in immunity. Sweet potato is more than a great pie at Thanksgiving and Christmas. It's also a great source of vitamin A, vitamin C, beta-carotene, and potassium. So baking 1 or 2 and having it with dinner in place of a white potato is highly advised. So as you can see, eating healthy plays a huge role in strengthening our bodies and giving ourselves the best chance of preventing or fighting off infectious disease. Things that can hurt the immune system and leave us vulnerable to infectious disease. Fast food. Fast food is the body's enemy. It's full of salt, potential carcinogens, and sugar. Many times sugar is added to food, fast food in particular, to make it appealing and more addictive. Processed food is also the body's enemy. Processed food tends to be full of preservatives, questionable chemicals, and tons of salt. Lack of exercise can hurt us as well. Being sedentary is associated with a plethora of health issues, and to no one's surprise, a lack of exercise hinders the immune system. Exercise helps by literally helping cells that provide immunity to travel around the body. This cuts down on inflammation and oxidation in the body. I know I mentioned vitamin C in oranges, tangerines, etc., but you also hurt yourself by drinking too much orange juice. You could hurt yourself that way. Conventional orange juice is full of sugar and flavor packets. You can quickly put on weight without realizing it if you drink too much conventional orange juice too often. Being overweight is also associated with being vulnerable to infectious disease. That's why I recommend either buying an organic orange juice or eating organic oranges instead. A lack of bathing can also cause bacterial overgrowth on the body, which can lead to infection setting in. Some kids may not want to wash every day, but stern parenting will take care of that. That being said, some adults may feel as if they're too busy to wash as often as they should. I know that sounds bizarre, but that can happen. One of the simplest things we can do to fight off infectious disease is to shower and or bathe daily. In addition, hand washing, which is super simple and is extremely effective, puts us all in a place to prevent infection from setting in the first place. In regard to bathing, showering, and hand washing, I would recommend using a natural soap free of dyes and questionable chemicals. I would not use antibacterial soap. There are normal bacteria that are on our skin that are necessary for us to live. Antibacterial soap can kill off the good bacteria and affect the normal flora of the skin in a way which can allow bad bacteria to become opportunistic and thrive, leading to infection. Also, I would limit the use of hand sanitizers. Personally, I use hand sanitizer a lot, but I don't use it every day, and I would avoid using it every day. If you work in the public on a daily basis, I would recommend washing your hands more and using sanitizer less. Another option you have is to wear gloves and change them thoroughly throughout the day, depending on what your career is. If you work in retail or grocery and you want to wear gloves, I would change them every few hours or so. Obviously, if you work in healthcare, you change them for each patient, each and every patient. There are a few other things that I'll mention that can help us. Staying hydrated is vital. Try to drink at least 6 to 8 glasses of water per day. Water will help your GI system, your liver, and your kidneys to flush out pathogens and keep those systems functioning at their best. In this day and age, it's hard to get 8 hours of sleep. I would aim to do that, as when you sleep, your body repairs itself. This repair includes fighting off cancer cells and bolstering cellular function. You can also try to exercise 3 to 5 times a week if you can. A body that gets a healthy diet, gets adequate hydration, and physical exercise is a healthy body. A healthy body gives you the best advantage when it comes to fighting off infectious disease. That's going to do it for episode 9 of season 3 of the Living Healthy podcast. I hope you found this podcast informative, beneficial, and I hope that I've motivated you to make the decision that you'd like to make. Thank you for your support. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time. And remember, living healthy creates a better you.